Hi, everybody. It's 10:15 local time here, which means it's time to start session 9A. And in addition to my usual track hosting duties here, I'm also co-presenting with my friend and colleague, Michael Servaes, who is the director of the International Society of Chief Data Officers. And the topic we're going to talk to you about today is a little bit of a challenge for us as a community. Fortunately or not, I was part of the group that put together some of the early federal legislation that required CIOs to be created as part of the federal government. And what we did notice was that the CIO role became very fragmented, and we're asking CIOs to do a lot of things, and asking them to do more with data right now is probably not a recipe for success. So that's the reason we're here as a group of data leaders to work on this. And we also were able to go back and do some research in that we found that the average tenure of a CIO in today, 2021, is still measured between 2 and 4 years. However, the average chief financial officer in similar sized organizations, they have a tenure that is 3 times that long, closer to 12 years in this case. So something's not going right in the CIO area. And what Michael and I thought we'd try to do with this talk here is to help provide some guidance and hopefully to get some of you all to join us as part of the society here so that we can all collectively work on this problem on this. Let me introduce Michael Servaes. Michael has many years of experience and data leadership within a certain army that he may or may not tell us some stories about around all that. And he has also taken on the job of the executive director of the International Society of Chief Data Officers. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for that kind welcome. I think the role of the director is that I was the last one standing when the music stopped, and Rich pointed his fickle finger of fate towards me. But it's a great role to take on, and I think we do what it says on the tin. We try. It's a British sort of analogy there that comes out of an advert, but we're trying to sort of place the data officer, the data leader, in a better position through greater understanding of what they're doing, and sort of trying to educate everybody as well, because as we will discuss, I think there's still a great deal of misunderstanding. There's a great deal of an immense amount of good work being done, but still a great deal of misunderstanding, which is perhaps one of the reasons behind this sort of the short-termism in tenure, and I think we'll get to that. But I think it's important that we all sort of start getting to grips with what data leadership is about, and how data leadership can sort of influence organizations and deliver for organizations, and what we as a society are doing are just trying to sort of add to one of the analogies we used when I was in the military was the golf bag. So we're trying to add to the clubs that not my sport, but we're trying to add to the clubs that the chief data officer, the data leader, has available to them, so that they can play a better game and perhaps sort of extend their tenure to actually deliver real long-term benefits to the organization that they belong to.
And according to Gartner, at this point in time, the tenure of CDOs is about 1 year, sometimes getting to 2 years. So we do have our work cut out for us. Let's start out with sort of one of the real challenging areas that we are facing as data leaders. And Michael said it already. The idea is that many people think they understand data. Unfortunately, however, though, what we find out when we speak to them is that it's very much like the blind people and the elephant. Different parts of the elephant appear to different people at different points in time to be different things. And while that's interesting, it actually is, as Michael said, a bit of a problem. So in data management, we've used the term data management is everything that occurs between when data is sourced and when data is used in organizations. The problem with that is that it's kind of vague. And so a lot of people go, okay, you guys are the data folks. What does that mean? Well, let's take it a step further. We also have forgotten to include reuse as an important component of data, because data is valuable, but data is more valuable when it is able to be reused as in a reliable component to build our systems. Recall that our systems are combinations of people, process, hardware, software, and of course, data. So we've come up with a little bit stronger definition of data management in this. And we still look at these sources and uses kind of thing, but now break it up into a bit more detail. Two halves, if you will. There's the acquisition, the munging, the engineering. And you can see we've got some words like collection, evaluation, et cetera, on the left-hand side, and data exploitation on the other side, of which data science, of course, is a portion. But we're trying to define this. So we said we have uses in here, but most of the time we forget about engineering for reuse, which is an absolutely critical component, because they do make two different things. All of you know that if you plant a garden, you probably do some things at the end of the year to close out your garden and get ready for the spring planting in the next year around all of this. The reason this is complicated and also sort of problematic is, for example, if we take something like data science, which is a fine way of learning about algorithms and things like that, they don't understand that 80% of their time is spent doing these things over here in data engineering if the organization hasn't made other arrangements, hasn't sourced it so that their most expensive data scientists are also doing work that could be done by either automation or staff, depending on how we're doing all of these things. So we're not quite at a formal definition yet, but we are trying to illustrate that this is more complex than most people understand. Michael, over to you.
I totally agree. I mean, the whole, I come from an organization where perhaps in today's more thoughtful world, wandering around and talking about exploitation can be seen as being being misconstrued. So in terms of the data exploitation, what we're trying to do is we're trying to use it, reuse it, and to have a valid reasons for doing that. Now, why am I talking about it in those terms? We've got the whole sort of data engineering aspect on the left-hand side of the screen, and that perhaps is part of the reason that people misunderstand what data leadership is, because you put data in front of a term that other people quite understand, sort of in front of engineering in this case, or in front of leadership, and a lot of the highly charged sort of alpha leaders of organizations view data people in a slightly pejorative way, not helped by the rendition of data people on screen, on the big screen and on the small screen. And then they're sort of, their minds are, if you like, befuddled with the excitement of people coming and telling them all about what data science can do for them, what AI can deliver, what machine learning can deliver. And they sit there wondering why the data leader that they have is still fighting their way through the miasma of sorting out the data that they have, because I recall, and because many firms don't understand that. I recall, I think I've told you, Peter, I went and worked in a company, and we were just doing some data mapping, and we were looking for the data, the data systems that they held that had personal data on them. And when we arrived, we were given the assurance from the leadership that there were 5 systems that had personal data, all 5 of them. Yes. Now, when I left the organization, and that was at the end of a contract, only sort of 7 months later, we had mapped 210 different systems, and we were still going on. We knew that there was more out there to find, and the business couldn't quite understand what was going on, what had happened. They had thought that because every so often they bought some new software, that that new software had come in and replaced everything that had gone on before it, which obviously it hasn't, it doesn't, unless it's engineered so to do. And they had built up this sort of massive sort of snake pit of interwoven systems with passing data hither and thither without any real understanding or control over what was happening. And they needed to, as a business, to advance, to start delivering on the sort of P&L lines that they were being asked to, and certainly the profit that they were being asked to sort of move towards, that they needed to sort this all out, and they needed to bring in a data leader. But the first instance was the data leader is going to come in, he's going to do a bit of data science, and then it's all going to be fine. He'll buy one of two softwares, data management softwares that they'd heard about, and nothing more needed be done. And you have to sit down and explain to the leadership, and this is where the leadership in data leadership comes in, and convince them that I have first convinced the CEO that he needed a chief data officer. The person he was going to bring in was about 4 or 5 grades below that, and so would have little or no traction in the business, because this is a big business change product, and they needed to bring in a leader who was going to grab the various bits, bring them together, and sort of point them in the right direction. They were going to mold together what data science was doing, so it wasn't a science project. And again, in organizations that I've been in, it was in the army, I was asked to sit down with somebody who was coming in, who was going to sort of show us the way through the tunnels that we were digging towards the light with some product that they were coming in to sell, and it was data science that they were coming to sell. And they said, well, if you let us in, we'll do this work on your data, and it'd be really great. And I said, so why are you going to do that? And they said, no, it's because it's there, and we've got this tool, and it's really great. And you've got to understand that that's why we're going to do it. And I said, so essentially, you want to come in and do a science project? And they said, no, it's data science. It's really important. It's the way. It's the future. And I said, no, but there's no why. There's no wherefore. There's no benefit to the organization that you're going to see. You're just going to come in and have a play. Now, coming in and having a play on the data and doing some and seeing what can be achieved has its place, but this was going to be a substantial investment, and it wasn't going to sort of provide data that we could move towards delivering and meeting the information needs of the organization. It wasn't going to enable us in the way we were going to sort of go out and spread the good word about what data can deliver to a skeptical organization. And so it was just that. It was just somebody coming in who was trying to push through a mate a capability that they had that they wanted to employ, in the hope that eventually that they would find a use for it. Which brings me around to this, your point on the formal data reuse management, where I have found in across a number of organizations, across a number of verticals, so having left the army, is that the majority of the work that people are looking at doing in terms of data are implementing a data organization, data governance, for want of a better word. And I was at a bank, and there was a massive project. The project team were sort of 10% of the bank size, trying to bring in data governance. And I remember my first day there, I heard the word ontology much more than I'd heard it in the rest of my life put together. And I said to them, okay, fine, so we're going to work towards an ontology. And they said, yeah, we bought the software, this, software X, and we're going to buy software Y to go with it, and that's going to be brilliant, and it'll deliver data governance for us. And I said, so we're going to do all of this, and but what's the governance going to be for? How is it going to help the organization do its job? How are you going to sell it to the people that are going to use it? And how are you going to take your data from just being able to do some historic reporting of where the bank is and what it has done, to start actually using it, start using it in terms of its anti-money laundering business, in terms of predicting people's behavior, so that you can sort of have a better understanding of their credit risk, the risks that they will come up with in terms of how they're moving large sums of money about, and what that means. And the answer was, the CDO says that we're doing it. We've bought these systems. We don't need to talk to the bank staff, and we don't need to look at how we're going to reuse the data, because we've got some reports that we do, and as long as we can improve those, job done. And so they were going to sort of almost shackle the bank's ability to move forward, to use all the benefits of exploiting their data by this sort of overly Stalinist approach to data governance, which didn't take into account what the organization was doing, what the organization wanted to do, and what the information requirements were. So it's, we still have to move towards, in our understanding of how we as data leaders behave, and how we sell the business, how we sell to the business that we're going to do data management, we're going to bring in a degree of data governance, some management, some work on data quality, some data science, where it can be used. Is we've got to start looking at data beyond the constricts of, if I buy system X and impress and sort of implement it, I can go through the motions of the implementation, achieve some low-hanging fruit, and it's always the low-hanging fruit that goes. Nobody really looks at the long-term problems of data, and I can create a reputation for myself and move on to my next task, which will probably be slightly better paid, slightly more slightly more convenient for me, before the problems of not actually looking at all the other questions that surround the data start to come home to roost. And the organization gets a backlog of formal data reuse sort of requests that can't be serviced by an organization that has been built up not to help deliver that. Does that help?
Yes, and two important concepts on this slide before we move into the next phase on this. And the first one is that most people, again, don't understand. They understand a portion of this. And so it's important to have a perspective. And to your point directly, Michael, a system is not defined as a system unless it also includes a purpose. The system is organized for a particular reason. So There's no way that you can say, well, we're just going to go explore and that'll be the answer to it. There has to be a business perspective. But the other part is, and these are some tips and tools for aspiring CDOs, is to say that we're going to take all of our data right now, which is currently completely ungoverned, and we're going to start to govern portions of it. And we'll start to look at it in context here. But let's dive into the actuals on the priorities that are here. So I'm going to go ahead and put them up on the screen. This is our membership that we surveyed, a couple hundred responses in this case. And you can see that data literacy is the #1 topic, but that more importantly, there is a variety of things that occurred here in this. We're going to go through the top 7 of these. There are also lots of others that all came out as less than 5% in our possibilities here. But I think it's important to focus on what CDOs are seeing as their issue and talk a little bit about what kinds of things we can start to supply them with from a society perspective. The first one is what I call the bad data decision spiral. I like to define data governance as managing data with guidance. But the further up the food chain that I do talking to people about data governance, I say, as you go higher up the chain, it's more about managing data decisions with governance rather than just managing data with governance, because we have lots of good technical people and we have lots of good management, but most of them are data illiterate. And so if you have smart people making bad data decisions, the organization is faced with a absolutely crazy decision spiral on this. To that end, we're starting to put in place something called a digital civics framework. And the idea here is that we've seen a lot of people in the literacy space focusing in on my L5 here that we've got with the professional acumen pieces right up there in the upper right-hand corner. In other words, the argument is about whether somebody who's got a PhD in statistics can call themselves a data scientist, or whether you need to have more statistics or more math or more algorithmic training. In other words, we're arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin here. If we're going to move the thing on society's level, we also have to take into consideration that we have 2.5 billion what I call mobile data spreaders out there in the world. These are young people who are not adults, who have a phone, a mobile device of some sort that is connected to the internet. They have a supercomputer that is connected to the internet. They need literacy. So do, of course, adults. But we can't enforce that. There's no laws in place that force us to make children and adults data literate. But what we can influence is the second area that I've circled up there, the knowledge workers. And this is really where organizations are going to get the most bang for data literacy. Yes, it's important that data people continue to get smart and knowledgeable about what we do, but the gap between us and the rest of the knowledge worker community is enormous. And I absolutely predict within 5 years, HR will now start screening for data literacy concepts, because if you have 2 knowledge workers in front of you that are equal in other aspects, you should hire the one that has the best data literacy characteristics that are in this. One more piece, and then I'll turn it over to Michael on this as well. And that is that while we talk about all the wonderful things that we'd like to do, data first or data centric or whatever they are, we don't have any specific criteria about what that means. So we've put together some little bits here that say that this is kind of like the Agile Manifesto, if you'll recall that, just to say that we value data programs that drive IT programs. We value information investing over technology acquisition activities. We value stable shared organizational data over IT component evolution. And most importantly, we value data reuse over acquisition of new data resources, because fully 50% of all organizational data is never analyzed. Michael, any and all of these that you want to jump in on?
Indeed, Peter. I mean, straight to your first point, about the difference between data literacy and what people are actually asking for. I have lost count of the number of data roles that I've come across where, having worked in data for a long time now, as indeed, as you have, you go for a role and it requires you to be a PhD in statistics. It requires, a master's degree in computer science. It requires, you know, all sorts of qualifications and levels of experience. You know, why aren't you a programmer in 15 different languages to be a data leader? And you can then go to the organization and find that that person, if they do employ them, is sat in their office, you know, door shut, wet towel around their head to sort of keep them cool, and it's just working at their screen, trying to produce whatever they're trying to produce, but in worse than your average stovepipe. You know, it's them and the machine, and that's the way ahead. And they're finding that as they try and implement it across businesses, that it's just not working. I recall a business I was at. They had you know, I was working at group headquarters, and inside the group, it was a customer service organization. They had a number of different brands, which they wanted their customers to be able to move across with ease. You know, not an unreasonable desire in this day and age. And so they brought in some great project managers, brilliant. And they brought in some other people who had data in their experience. And then they brought in some, they built a data governance team. What they said was a data governance team, but it was a data quality team, looking at data quality, because what they found was that, you know, Joe Smith probably had a persona across most of their brands, but they refer to themselves with a full name, by an initial, by a series of initials, by all sorts of different ways that we all understand about why we need to do some data quality work to bring it together, to find some master data. But what they were just doing, and they'd spent £18 million on this project. So what's that in US dollars? Sort of 22, 24 million?
24, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, they'd spent that. And I got in there and they asked me to take a look at it. And I said, you're never going to deliver. And why not? We've got this idea and we've got this data quality plan. And I said, well, yeah, but what are you going to do with the data quality? No, we've done some data quality work, so it must work. But neither side understood how to bring the two together. And this is to the point about data literacy and the information literacy piece. We have to build, as leaders across the organizations that we work in, an understanding of what each side of the business, you know, that the user, the creator, the storer, the manipulator, the governor of the data, the roles that they have to play in bringing, to enable the organization to bring the data together, to exploit it, and to look at new ways of exploiting that data. And they have to be able to articulate what their role is in terms of data and what they would like to see from other people in terms of data. So what was never said by the project to the data quality people is that they wanted to be able to bring all of those different ways of expressing Joe Smith of 27 The Archers into a single person, so that coming into this new capability that they were building, this new single wallet, for want of a better term, that could operate across all, unify the wallets that person held across all the band, they wanted essentially to build some master data. And they weren't able to articulate that. And the data quality team at the time were not able to articulate that all they were doing was essentially some pattern matching in data and bringing it together. And that in and of itself, that had no use, because they weren't able to then apply that, to bring it across and use it. So, and I didn't need a PhD in statistics. I didn't need a master's degree in computer science to work that one out. It was a bit of literacy, and that's not a bit of understanding, a bit of an ability to grasp the ideas that pulls them together. And we should be trying to expand the literacy of the levels of the organization that we work in, so that they're not all, you know, top grade computer scientists that can reprogram a supercomputer, but that they understand what their role is, in data, and what they are trying to get out of data, and they can articulate that to each other. So in terms of how the data leader interfaces with the rest of the leadership of an organization, what they're trying to do is to get, you know, the chief financial officer and their team, the chief HR officer, and all, you know, chief marketing officer, and all those sort of people to say, we can do reporting, but are we reporting the things that you actually want to know? Not just the stuff that we've historically done, because you know, that's the way we've done it, and we've done it on a SQL database, on some numbers, dead easy, you know, and we're looking good, and we're giving you some answers that you may or may not find useful. You know, what are the answers that you're really seeking? Do we need to do more in terms of reusing our data to create new packets, new sort of products that we can then bring into looking at how we become predictive or prescriptive in our use of data, how we can answer the questions that you really need to know, and that's the sort of crux of it. And so you sort of not so much teaching them, you're helping improve their literacy in terms of how they ask the questions that they need the answers for, rather than just give me a report on last month's performance, because, you know, you can only go quite so far in producing that, or, you know, telling me tell me where all our drivers are at the moment. That, although that might be slightly invasive in terms of people's sort of freedom of movement. So I think it's driving that, and to the point, you know, that you sort of finished off with almost, and is tucked down in the bottom right hand corner. It's saying that we're looking at the data, what it can do, how it can do it, what it means to us, rather than worrying about, do I need to buy a new software system to do it, or my computer's not fast enough for it. You know, let's go out and buy a whole new series of computers, or, you know, why haven't I got the latest in tech so that I can do data better? It's, you know, we'd probably find that 2 or 3 generations of tech ago, if we'd really applied it, we could have taken huge leap forwards in the use of data and the exploitation of data, but we were still concentrating on the tech, on the IT bit, you know. And it goes to the informed information investing. I think you're right, Peter, that it's not just buying the latest tech, it's what are we buying it for? How is it going to help us? And all of those sort of questions.
Sorry, Michael, 2 quick points before we move on. One, you'll notice I've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the upper right-hand corner as a reminder to us all that these levels of literacy apply all the way up and down. It's important that data scientists understand the rest of the data community, as well as knowledge workers understanding aspects of what the data science mission is, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason for that is so important is because I heard this story on another event. I'm sorry I don't have the actual citation for it here, but it was a new data scientist who went running into a corporate executive and said, hey, I got an 86% match, and was aghast because this corporate executive came in and red-faced and like, in our organization, we don't do anything less than 100%. Again, just two ships passing in the night. There was clearly a lot of miseducation around that particular piece. An 86% correlation might be very useful in some areas, but the CEO did not understand that aspect of, leading to some very, very challenging areas around all of that. Next area, of course, that CDOs have said to us that they're concerned with is data science, but collectively it's not really our remit as data leaders. We can influence the motivation, the value, as you said several times, Michael, of the purpose, and keep things focused in the right type of direction. And while this is a new area, we will probably be able to get some contributions to it quickly, because the folks that come out of data science school are anxious to do things. But what they don't know is they don't know the business. They don't know what a return on investment is. If somebody said they had 86% and somebody else said you could have stopped at 70 and that would have been good enough, well, that may have taken you back 2 years, which is, as you said, time to market. Much more on this. Specialization is clearly required, though. And what we're looking for is to have everybody in the organization focused in on aspects like data privacy, proper use of data, all sorts of other things. And I'm just reproducing the data ethics canvas that many of you have seen from time to time as well. It's a great place to introduce that, because almost nowhere, just as in most modern business curricula, do we actually talk about ethics as we're training these people to be leaders in this field. Again, Michael, back over to you.
Ethics is a pet topic, you know, and it's been brought to back to the fore recently, and you know. And just when you want to speak about it, it's that time, isn't it, when the brain lets you down. There was, we're talking about spyware and how it's
all over the news these days, right?
Pardon?
Spyware all over the news these days.
All over the news these days. And, you know, doubtless some bright spark sat somewhere, and we know where, has sat down and said, well, I can do this with data. And he's brought some very clever people in together, and they produced this spyware that is being used on all sorts of things. And, you know, some of it has a valid use, you know, in terms of tracking parcels and when your delivery might or might not get to you. And that's seen to have a valued customer use. But a lot of this spyware is getting in, and it's finding out what people are doing. It's being able to control them in certain parts of the world. It is undoubtedly being used by governments in terms of their ability to repress dissent within their peoples. And we have to think that, you know, this spyware that is being used in all that repression is being developed in what we might glibly call, you know, Western European liberal democracies, by people who doubtless view themselves, you know, as on the liberal left of the political spectrum. You know, all sorts of personal freedoms, my ability to do this and my ability to do that, and they're not looking at and they're saying, well, I have the ability to make this, and I have the ability to sell it, and therefore that's all good. And there is no heed paid to the ethics around what that capability can actually do, and how it will be used by the people that they're going to sell it to. And, you know, people in data across all sections of data, not just those people who are producing spyware or everything, need to understand the ethics that sit around their use of data, because it quite often doesn't. It sort of doesn't allow you to progress. I remember I was asked in a year where there had been a number of fatalities in physical training. I had been asked to look at how we could use wearables to improve how people, as part of a program, how people sort of understood their body, how their bodies were monitored during physical training, so that we could, you know, somebody was out on a 3-mile run, it was in a squad, they keeled over and died, and, you know, surely with a wearable, a lot of the precursors to that cardiac event could have been detected, and that person could have been stopped, treatment summoned earlier, all those sort of good ideas. And it was going to be tied in with a program of educating people about diet, educating people about sleep. So the wearables were going to be worn sort of almost 24 hours a day, and it had a lot of benefits. And you suddenly saw that this was the thing to do. It was a no-brainer. Let's do it. And then then I said, so what happens if the young people are being asked to wear this 24/7, and they get a weekend off, they go home, and at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning, there's a massive spike in their biometrics. Do we assume that it's chemically induced? And do we then sort of send them for drug testing on the Monday morning when they come back to work? Because on the Saturday, when they've been out and about enjoying themselves, we have surreptitiously been spying on them and their activities. Okay, the use of drugs is illegal. It's especially illegal in the military. But it's not what it was designed for. It wasn't designed to catch those people out. It wasn't designed to constrain their freedom of choice, and we deemed it unethical. And I know that the US military was looking at a similar program, and it was going to include out of bounds areas, so geographical sort of monitoring as well. And if you went into an out of bounds area, your chain of command was going to be informed. Now that really is, and so they stopped it. That really is a monumental invasion of the individual. I've been in a position of running the discipline in an a unit, and frequently soldiers were brought in for having gone out of bounds, but they knew the rules. They knew what they were to do, what they shouldn't do, but they were given the freedom of choice to make a complete twit of themselves and go ahead and do it. And that was the ethical way to behave. It wasn't the ethical way to behave is to sort of put a monitor on them that went around. I've gone down the ethics rabbit hole again. I'm with you. Data science and data privacy don't necessarily look directly as being the role of the data leader. Data privacy, certainly, if you follow GDPR, the data privacy person sits outside the routine chain of command within an organization and has should have direct access to the board, so that they can bring matters to the fore at the right level, with pace, so that data privacy problems can be addressed. But
sorry, Michael, I'll move on to the next slide because we're going to run out of time here if we're not careful.
My final point on that is, but the two areas are closely linked, because the mapping that is required for the data privacy regulation is a terrific boon to the data leader, the data governor, who finds where the data flows are, what data is being flowed, and that can help them with their decision making about where which data elements need to be governed, which don't, where the quality work needs to happen, where the exploitation can happen better. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just watching our time. So this slide really talks about an unknown role of how data management actually works. So I've put up on there the Damon-Dimbach wheel. If you aren't familiar with it, just Google it and you'll see it pop right up. But the key is that data management in conjunction with data strategy helps make your analytics more useful to the organization. And that's really a key. If you don't understand that piece, you'll have the flaw that Michael described earlier around that whole area. Michael, I know you've got a word or two to say on universities. I put the word miserable failure up there, but I think you feel pretty strongly about that as well.
Well, they're not. I recently spoke to a data science lecturer in a university who told me that their course literally hadn't changed in the last 5 years, but so much has. So much has changed in the last 5 years in terms of how you exploit data, how you manage it. You know, the whole, 10 years ago, I remember the big news, or 5 years ago even, that big data was still big news, and we were talking about Hadoop and Apache, and things have just moved on to a substantial degree. And for universities still to be sort of sat back, happily chugging through the same old, and producing data leaders for yesterday, is not advancing how data is being taught. Yes, and they're concentrating on, a lot of them come out as useful programmers. So tell the truth. Is it a programming degree that they're coming out with, or is it a degree in computer, in data leadership and data science? It's we have to sort of look at whether or not we are what we're doing in terms of universities. Are we fitting people in the old, in Great Britain, we used to have polytechnics and universities, and the difference was polytechnics tended to be more focused on preparing people for teaching them to degree level, but in a more sort of focused way at employment and future employment. So whereas the universities tended to be more in the world of general education, and people could then move on and specialize and whatever. And we have to decide, as we become more and more bound by tech, as it becomes a greater part of our life, as it becomes more important in how we fight climate change, how we manage the environment, and all the matters of great concern, is how we are teaching our young people to make them useful in work, or how we are teaching them to become leaders. I mean,
the reason I said miserable failure on here, just to be perfectly clear, is that this is our efforts to influence the university curriculum. We just have not yet managed to figure out how to get through to some of these accreditation bodies to say that your curriculum, as you said, Michael, needs updating and could be made more relevant to the whole process in here. And of course, no ethics in there as well. I mentioned that a little bit before.
Well, just quickly, Peter, you probably remember it was about 6 or 7 years ago at the Symposium. Somebody asked the dean of the Sloan School, why are they not teaching some data elements, some data modules on their MBA, and why they're not teaching some MBA type business modules on their computer science degrees. So that what we are really doing is, because computer scientists are going to go into some sort of business or some sort of post-educational occupation where they're going to try and deliver it, so they have a better understanding of what they're doing. And the future business leaders, of the world, are coming out with a better understanding of what data can do for them, and how increasing their data literacy. Going back 3 slides.
Absolutely. And this leads us to leadership as well. And you've mentioned it a couple of times. I saw this little piece that I'm showing in the upper left-hand corner of the screen here on LinkedIn recently, which was somebody was going, wow, if I've got chocolate ice cream and anything awesome in the middle of it, I'm still going to get chocolate ice cream on the other side of it, because of course we understand garbage in and garbage out. And he said, that doesn't matter whether you've got the thing in the middle is blockchain or without blockchain. Oh my gosh, if this is the area that we're trying to educate people in, we have some big challenges around there, because we're asking people to come into organizations and take on a role that somebody else already has. It's called Chief Information Officer. And now we're asking a CDO to come in. And our membership tells us that the first time oftentimes is a lot more about change management and culture than it is about data, especially in the early days of a CDO's life.
No, I agree with you entirely. We have, it's about change management throughout, because especially at the moment, because we are developing so many new ways of looking at data, so many new ways of dealing with data, so many, and we're trying to do more than just base reporting with data, to look at new products, new insights that we can gain across the world, let alone those on the unethical side of the sort of spectrum that are looking at how that they can, increase the surveillance of individuals, and that might be for perfectly valid reasons. If you're chasing terrorists, perfectly valid reason. If you're trying to reduce democratic dissent, perhaps not a valid reason to do it. You're going to use similar tools.
Absolutely. Technology can be both a positive and a negative force on here.
Yeah. So
data valuation, of course. Sorry, Michael. Laney's book, wonderful book on infonomics that he had a couple of years ago, is the place most people go to start their valuation process. I like to add on this book here, which I've sold actually more copies of Doug Hubbard's books than I have my own on here, but it's a wonderful book called How to Measure Anything. And it gives you the ideas that you can start to scrape together pennies, because pennies, when multiplied by billions, add up to hundreds of millions. And that's a really good set of numbers to take a look at in there. So I've reproduced John Ladley's wonderful table on how to create value from data. He did this in his data governance book and allowed us permission to use this. But Michael, you had a couple of ideas up here, whereas it's relatively easy to quantify the cost and storage and to say we use data to derive value, but it's not quite clear on how to quantify all this. And you had a couple points that you wanted to add up to it.
Yeah, it's in so much of the sort of the chat around infonomics is as data is an asset, and that's brilliant. Yeah, you can measure all sorts of things that are being brought out of what data can do, how you can use data to create value, and the aero engine industry is a new way of showing how they can use data to create value, and how they use data as the measure of value. You essentially don't sell you an aero engine anymore. They sort of sell you a capability, which is in a two-engined aircraft, two engines that push you somewhere at the required rate of knots with the required rate of thing, and the value is the data that they're getting back, which is helping them in the maintenance of the engines, in so increasing safety, reducing maintenance costs, and helping with engine development. And that all goes back to the manufacturer. And so yes, you can talk about how you can get some value out of it. You can say my terabyte costs X, my terabyte to store, I can buy that off the computer. But at the bottom of that, and you've gone on one, is the piece is business is then being told it's an asset, and you must quantify it as an asset, data as an asset. And how do you do that? You can quantify it as a cost. You can quantify where you have. And I really would, if you could go back one, that'd be really helpful.
Sorry.
My mad train of thought, because.
And I'm not watching. We've got exactly 5 minutes left in the session, Michael.
I've got about 2 minutes, if that. As long as they come up again. Yep. Yeah. So you see, you can derive. So yes, we can say how much it costs. You can combine data sets, brilliant, and you can produce a product, and you can say, yeah, well, I've created some value. But if you use that data set B, say in the example there, and use it across 5 or more, or a number of products, how do you discern the value to the business of that data set, so that beyond going to another business and saying, I'd like to sell you this for X dollars, X pounds. So we have to sort of put the brains trust that is being developed in those industries, in economics and in terms of accountancy and actuarial business, is to look at how we can start quantifying the value of data to businesses, because businesses that are becoming reliant on that data are becoming reliant upon the value that it produces to them, to borrow money, so that they can invest, so that they can develop new ideas, new ways of exploiting, all those sort of things. And I think that the next great leap needs to be somewhere in that direction, so that we can truly begin to look at how data brings value to, or having data brings value to the organization.
We've got 4 minutes, Michael. I'll let you do the conclusions here. Go ahead.
So the isCDO, those it sounded like the thoughts of sort of Chairman Pete and Chairman Mike on that, and it really wasn't. We have through the CDO magazine and our partnership with them, and through the Symposium, we have some CDO ambassadors appointed, and we asked them what their thoughts in these particular areas were, and this has been the sort of distillation of those thoughts, added to examples and thoughts that we had been developing anyway, and which had come through our interaction with the rest of the body of the society. Doing data well needs to be done. It's a team sport. It's not a narrow vertical within a business. It is probably better characterized as a horizontal across the business that looks at how it works in all areas. Unless we sort of increase the level of literacy, the level of understanding of what we're doing and how we can help, and how data works through, across, around, for, under and above the business, we'll end up becoming sort of pigeonholed. We used to talk, we used to ask the question, why CDO, not CIO? Because the CIO had essentially become the Chief Information Technology Officer, bringing forward news, chasing new computer systems, making sure that the leadership of the business had the latest tech. We've got to become more than a part of the business that produces the latest data tech. And we can't become a science project. They're valuable, they help advances, but they're not the core business of data. The core business of data in a business is that business making it work, making it run better. And Peter, we had that fantastic talk last week from name escapes me.
Kevin James.
Kevin Jones. Yeah, he was fantastic about how he used data to improve recruitment and improve retention. And that's not a science project, and that's got the whole of the organization, State of Illinois Children's Services, talking about data, using data, thinking about how they do data better, and it's good. You've got to be ethical, not just in there are so many bright ideas about how data can be used. If you don't use it ethically, somebody out there will restrict you. Privacy legislation is only happened because the businesses that were using personal data were using it in such a cavalier way. And
we call it the surveillance capitalist industry, right?
Yeah, we've got to think about how that works. And to our last point, we've got to develop metrics that can show the value of data, and not just we've been through the lunacy that is, if we use computers and data, we can get rid of all our clerks, we can get rid of all our filing systems, we can get and we can show value that way. A, that didn't work and was a load of rubbish. But B, we've got to start understanding, if we're everywhere I go, I'm told, yeah, we can store all the data we like for as long as we like, but we can't because it will degrade. And it would be brilliant because we don't know how much we can use it, how we're going to use it later, because it's going to be so cheap. It's going to be so cheap, but it's, the internet uses more electricity than the 7th biggest industrialized nation. Gangnam Style one video has been calculated to have used more electricity in 1 year than the country of Rwanda. If we're having to stick all our data centers in the high Arctic or under the sea just to cool them, we can't just go on chucking, carbon resources at data. We've got to start thinking about how we're using it, why we're using it, and what the true value of the retention of that data is. All of us in our houses throw away stuff that is no longer useful.
All right, so Michael, we're out of time at this point. I'm very creative to end up on a Gangnam note on this. We did have some questions in here, and if you're okay with that, I'm going to ask the questions be sent to you, and we'll follow up with folks that ask those specific questions as well. But thank you all for paying attention, and hopefully you'll check out the isCDO page, because we intend to continue doing this in future years to make this profession even stronger than it currently is. Michael, thanks for coming into this.
Thank you, Peter. It's been great.